Mohon strikes again. We'd been invited to a party in the newly opened English bar situated just on the outskirts of Mohon. So excited to try a new bar and meet new people, we accepted the invite, and after a hard day's graft on the slowly evolving house, we showered, changed, and headed out of our comfort zone to the new bar with high hopes for a decent night out. We'd obviously already met many of the people who had also decided to come along for the occasion. As being English, it was difficult not to keep bumping into other English, as we all stuck out like sore thumbs. The drinks were flowing, and there was the constant chatter of people growing louder as the evening wore on and as many more drinks were being consumed. Music was played, music that I could actually sing along to, blaring out from the booming speakers. I felt like I'd been transported to a bar in England for the night. It was a nice atmosphere, and I was enjoying my evening out. I spied Mr. Bob in the corner, nursing what seemed to be a strong cocktail of something or other. He was without his petite girlfriend, and so I decided to be polite and say a quick hello. Not as quick as I would have liked, as he hounded me with questions about his girlfriend, who I hardly knew. Admittedly, I had met her on a few occasions, and we'd had a coffee or two together in one of the rustic French cafes in the nearest town, but we certainly weren't best mates, and I hardly knew much about the timid girl. Although she did seem to have more to say when not accompanied by Mr. Bob himself, but nothing of real interest. He was convinced that she was sleeping with another man and was convinced that I knew all about it, even down to the detail of who the other man might be. I was shocked and also doubtful of his claims. If she was actually having an affair, I certainly knew nothing about it, and why had Mr. Bob decided to grill me and tell me his concerns? Was I becoming the agony aunt of Mohon? Isn't one of the criterias of this job to be over 60, short and plump, with an expansive bosom that people wanted to rest their heads against while crying out all of their problems? Why did it seem that people were suddenly telling me their secrets? I'd heard rumours that Mr. Bob was one for being a tomcat himself and playing around where he shouldn't. I'd even heard that he'd spent a night or two in this very bar keeping the new landlady company whilst her husband had to return to England for a few days. If Miss Timid had strayed the nest, then I didn't have any sympathy for this man who sat in front of me with a look of despair and sad puppy dog eyes. He probably knew that he only had himself to blame, if he was right, of course. I hadn't had quite enough to drink to tell him what I really thought, and responded with, "It's probably nothing, and don't worry." When his attention was taken for a moment to order another beer, I quickly made my retreat back to the safer ground at my husband's side. And that's where I stayed for the rest of the evening, stuck to my husband like shit stuck to the bottom of your shoe. Not my idea of the best night out, but as I always seemed to be hounded by people's problems when he wasn't around, I'd figured it was the best place to stay and try and enjoy myself the same. It wasn't until Mr. Slime made an entrance and a beeline for my husband that I knew it was time to get the hell out of there. My husband seemed to be enjoying himself, so this was going to be a difficult task. But after much gentle persuasion, I coaxed my husband home with the excuse of my irritable bowel playing up again, something I suffered from when I needed an escape route and quick. Was this how life was going to be in Mohon? Afraid to talk to the French through lack of understanding, and afraid to speak to the English in case they felt the need to continually share their doubts, secrets, or, God forbid, those skeletons that had long ago been hidden in the deepest, darkest closets. I needed friends, not the weight of the world on my shoulders. That night, I slept uneasily, with constant questions running through my head. Did we make the right decision? Can we be happy here? Is this really the life for me? My husband slept soundly beside me, which suggested to me that he wasn't even considering any of the questions that kept cropping up in my head, and, as of yet, had no answers to. He seemed happy with our choices, and I didn't want to ruin that for him. So eventually I found peace in my sleep, well, at least for that evening. The next morning, as early as the birds had started to sing their first morning song, Miss Timid was at my door. I answered the constant knocking, as my husband was incapable of moving from his comatose state. I was still in my pyjamas and had a bedhead beehive the woman of the 60s would have died for. Needless to say, I wasn't looking my best. I was surprised to see her at my door at such a ridiculous hour in the morning, looking as though she hadn't slept a wink, tearfully eyed and probably in need of something stronger than a coffee. which is exactly what I needed to wake up my sleepy face before listening to why she was banging my door down at this ungodly hour and why she obviously hadn't slept a wink. My mother brought me up with manners, so rather than telling her to come back at a more reasonable hour before slamming the door in her face, I did the right thing and I gave her a warm hug and invited her in with the offer of a hot cup of milky coffee. As I sleepily prepared the coffee, Miss Timid sat in silence in some sort of trance. The silence was welcomed as I still needed time for my brain to kick into gear. I'd never been a morning person. My mum had always said she knew I'd be the troublesome one for getting out of bed, as I'd given her the most difficulties during childbirth, preferring the warmth of the womb to the cold exterior of the outside world. She was probably contemplating if she really wanted to open her heart out to the woman she hardly knew, and was probably wishing she was back home with all her friends around to help her through whatever was troubling her. I was actually hoping she would think better of telling me anything. I'd rather just drink our coffee in silence and then go back to my warm bed to catch up on a few Zeds. But as she took a sip from her steaming mug, she looked up from the ground for the first time and tried to speak. Her bottom lip started to quiver. Tears rolled down her face in a constant flow, and her whole body started to shiver. She was releasing something she had kept hidden deep inside. The fight was over, and the body had taken over her mind as she let the heavy weight fall from her shoulders. We weren't one for hugs in my family, so I found it difficult to show her much affection, but my sympathy towards this poor young girl who wept before me, and me a stranger, made it impossible for me not to go to her and put my arms around her shoulders. Eventually, her body stopped quivering, and her contorted face started to relax back to normality. But the tears continued to flow as she opened her mouth for the first time to speak. I felt like I was the vicar awaiting the confession of a young girl. Can I just give her a few Hail Marys and send her on her way? Wouldn't that be easier than trying to give advice on something I probably knew nothing about? Now I know why the vicars opted for the Hail Mary in reality. They just wanted to get on with their day and sort out their own bloody problems. I put on my sympathetic face which said, "I'm listening, tell me when you're ready." But really I was thinking, make it quick so I can go back to that warm cosy bed and some serious sleeping action. And then she finally plucked up the courage and came right out with it, only pausing for a second to blink a tear away. "I've been sleeping with somebody else and he suspects something." "I know, love, he interrogated me last night and ruined me bloody evening. If you'd have told me just 24 hours sooner, I would have told him me bloody self for you, just to shut him up and get him out my face, so I could have had the great night I was supposed to have," is what I wanted to say. But I took a sip from my own steaming mug and decided not to say anything. Instead, I nodded slowly to show that I had heard, processed the information, and it had been understood. What could I have bloody said? The one thing I didn't want to know was who he was, as that would make me an apprentice to adultery, and I didn't want that one hanging over me. But before I could make an excuse of a toilet break so she had time to collect her thoughts, calm herself down and reconsider telling this practical stranger who sat before her, the words came out. I grimaced as though in pain as she revealed the other man's name, or boy, more to the point. "It's Irish Mike," she spluttered. Why, oh why, do these people think they can trust me? Is it written on my forehead in invisible ink, which is only visible to the suffering? Trust me, I have all the answers to all your problems. What should I have said? "All for it, girl. Your boyfriend's a self-obsessed, sexist twat. It'll all work out for the best. Now dry your tears and lie in that bed, as you did make it, me dear." And who the fuck is Irish Michael? Irish Michael was one of the rare foreigners that spoke fluent French, but this hadn't been through choice. As a young boy, he had been brought to rural Brittany from another rural village in Ireland by his parents. Their dream had been to buy a bar and open the first Irish local in a far-off land, serving Irish delights of Guinness, Murph and good old Irish stew. Their far-off land had been France, bringing a little bit of Ireland for the locals to taste and devour. They had bought their dream pub on the outskirts of Mohon, the very same bar I had been interrogated on the previous evening. The bar had been renovated to resemble a traditional Irish local, with lots of dark wood and low lighting for that rustic feel. The Guinness and Murphy's pumps had been installed behind the imposing bar, and the Irish flag was raised. They were officially ready to start their new lives from whatever it was they had been running from. Meanwhile, Irish Mike had been placed in a school where nobody spoke his language and where nobody wanted to play with the foreign boy with his strange coloured hair and piercing blue eyes. He had gone from blue-eyed wonder to blue-eyed stranger boy in less than a week. Irish Michael picked up the new language, which everyone spoke around him quickly, but not surprising as he was surrounded by the language 8 hours a day in his new school, and he was also at the age where learning a new language didn't pose any problems. The brain was open and could listen, record, and memorize, all without difficulty. But learning the language and being able to converse with his fellow classmates only made him more of an outcast, as his classmates teased him about his strange accent and unusual pronunciation. The bar flourished in the early days with the inquisitive locals shopping by to try the strange dark liquid that had been exported from a place they themselves would never visit or even wish to visit. Some of the locals became regulars in the mornings, afternoons, and evenings, and they would always thank their landlord for insisting that he too shared a drink with them. It would have been rude not to, of course. A few quiet drinks throughout the day soon turned into long sessions which lasted from dawn until way after dusk, causing arguments between husband and wife. Being intoxicated every evening was not why they had moved, but was probably what they had tried to run away from. The drinking continued and became heavier as the arguments also continued and became more violent. Irish Michael had become subject to some of the violence when he tried in vain to protect his mother from yet another beating and yet another night spent in the local hospital, where he was forced to translate yet another lie as to why his mother's ribs were broken, or why her 2 front teeth had been knocked out. It would appear that whatever they had run away from had finally caught up with them, until one evening, after another night of heavy drinking and another violent argument, the intoxicated landlord left the bar and returned with a JCB, which he had stolen from a nearby farmer and which he drove directly into the newly furnished bar, destroying his family's dream, their business, and their home, nearly killing himself and the 2 who slept soundly in the beds upstairs in the process. That same evening, the landlord was arrested for theft, driving under the influence, and for the destruction of a listed building. He was placed in prison and soon after deported back to the Irish lands from whence he came and where he had remained, leaving his wife and son a violent free life, but with no money, home, or business. They had scraped by, and Irish Michael had become the man of the house and protector of his mother, a hard-working boy, but with a craziness in his eyes that were to be feared if the craziness was to ever take over his mind. Mrs. Timid had dug herself a big hole, and I tried to give her advice but was more of a shoulder to cry on. The one piece of advice I did give her was that the truth had a habit of rearing its ugly head when least expected, so she should think very carefully about what or who she really wanted. I had been right. The truth did come out in the end, and she was kicked out of her home and found herself living in a small, grotty caravan with Irish Michael by her side for a short time. But maybe due to the damp mildew smell of the caravan, or maybe it had been the evil gossip of the English that had forced her to move on. Whatever it had been, she didn't stay long and left France and Irish Michael to try to rebuild her life again. Irish Michael stayed around to continue to serve his duty as protector of his mother, and who had found himself once again in a lonely world. And this time it was the English who had decided to keep him at arm's length. And what happened to Mr. Bob? It turned out that he hadn't been so innocent himself and had been sleeping with an underage girl of 14 years, who just so happened to be the daughter of his best mate, another family who had moved out to start a life. That little antic went down like a lead balloon, and Mr. Bob was forced to leave the country or face charges of underage sex. The coward that he was, he took the easy option and disappeared one evening, taking his white van and mini digger with him. There were no tears shed for his departure, and nobody questions if he had actually done a runner or if the angry father of the daughter made him disappear or not. It was good riddance and back to normality. I couldn't help wondering why every one of the expats I had encountered seemed to have some disaster or other happen to them, while the French continued on their daily lives without seemingly stressed and seemingly blissfully aware of the traumas affecting the foreigners. The curse of Mohon was moving fast, and the question that kept popping up in my head over and over again was, would we be affected by the curse of Mohon, or would we be immune?